All right, welcome class to our week 8. We are moving into or continuing into the literary analysis essay, and so I thought it would be good to continue that discussion. Um, and this is a great PowerPoint presentation that has a lot of information that's from Adrian Walters, so I have the citation there at the bottom. But I think that we have, you know, dabbled in this a little bit, so I hope that this week we can get further understanding. So let's get started. So what is a literary analysis? Why would you write it? So a literary analysis broadens your understanding and appreciation for a piece of literature or a piece of writing. It allows you to view the writing for more than just entertainment, and we can show off how smart we are when you're with your friends when you talk about Mark Twain or Kate Chopin or whomever your analysis of in casual conversation, of course. No, it really does help in terms of broadening your understanding, and also beyond like the element of literature, it helps you in terms of being able to analyze most anything. So you're diving deep into a work, being able to analyze pieces of something to create a whole. So it does go beyond just literature. It goes beyond just Mark Twain or whomever we're looking at. So so it should be. This is my favorite paper, so it should be fun, at least for me. But no, I think that analyzing is a great element in writing and communication, and so it should be helpful for sure. Okay, so things to think about when you are analyzing. So one would be themes. So a theme is an overall impression or idea that a work is trying to convey. And so you look at, does the author have themes that they want to convey in the work? And being able to find those things are good. Also, what techniques do authors use? So that could be theme, but it could also be mood or characterization. So what are these techniques that the author employs? Dialogue, setting, plot, and that kind of stuff. So you have your choice for this assignment of many works from our textbook. You could also go outside of the textbook to decide what you want to actually read and analyze. And this week we are going to discuss what your plan is in the discussion board. So also keep that in mind as well. What are you going to choose to read? What are you going to choose to analyze? Is it fiction? Is it nonfiction? And how will that connect to the analysis? Also think about when you are analyzing what lies beneath the text. Oftentimes an author is going to portray a story, a narrative, an idea, but there's also this underlying meaning behind what they're saying. So is it a political statement? Is it a statement about relationships? What is that meaning behind what they are saying? And then what is the significance? Is this work significant to yourself as a reader? Is it significant to history, to the time period in which it was written? So looking for the significance or the importance of the work is also important. So when you write a literary analysis, you can go beyond those basic elements of literature and then apply them to issues or categories. So those basic elements would be the theme, the plot, the characterization, the setting, and that kind of stuff, and then apply it to different issues or categories. So you could apply it to psychology or to politics, to history, whatever might be your area that you're passionate about, something that you're interested in. You can actually look at literature from different lenses, and that really depends on what your interest is, and really what the focus of the work is, and what the impression is that it gives. So for this essay, or for your first literary analysis, you're going to try to connect the purpose that the author or authors have through those literary elements and their application. Sorry about all the interesting little didn't mean to have all that. Okay, so The first thing you want to look at when you are trying to analyze a work is the author's purpose. And the purpose can be presented in many different ways. And I have some different elements that a purpose can be created or found in, which would be that theme, idea, the conflict of the work. So if there is a conflict, which would be like that main area of tension in the work, does that have to do with the author's purpose? And characterization. So that's the way in which the author creates or presents people or other types of characters in the work. So characterization can actually happen in lots of different ways. Yes, it is part of the people that are in a work, but characters can come in many different shapes and forms. Of course, we have stories that are written about animals or something like that. Think, Watership Down is a classic work by Richard Adams that actually has rabbits as characters. So that's definitely something that can happen. But think George Orwell's Animal Farm. Obviously, those characters are animals, and characterization is a very important thing in that work. So if you wanted to do that, something that you've read before, or something that a movie that you've watched, or something like that, you can go back and read the work. And characters are important in that regard, but also characters can come in the form of what is important, what is the focus of the work. I think about Cry the Beloved Country by Alan Paton. The actual land in that novel really creates its own character because it evolves throughout the story, just like a character would. It's dynamic. A character can be developed through the story. It has a life of its own. The character is affected by the content, by the conflict of the story. And so in that particular book, the land that is presented in the story actually is a character. And so characterization can come in many different forms and functions. Conflict, of course, is that main area of tension in a story or an essay, and that can come in nonfiction or fictional alike. This is the area in which the story is kind of cruxed upon. So it's that element in which you can go one way or you can go the other way, depending on the situation. We already talked about theme, and all of these can make an impression on the author's purpose. Why would an author write this particular work? I have lots of different silly things going on here. Okay, so theme, let's talk about that. So never analyze a theme by itself. A theme actually is related to lots of different elements of a story. So analyze how the author conveys the theme through the use of other techniques. So for instance, if the theme of the story is coming of age, this is a very common theme that you'll see in lots of different writing, and you want to see how this theme of coming of age is related to different areas of the text. So how do the symbols in the text relate to that theme of coming of age? Whether that is, a butterfly could be a symbol. So a butterfly starts as a caterpillar, it goes into a cocoon, and then becomes a butterfly. So that's a theme of or a symbol of the theme of coming of age. It could be figurative language. It could be the point of view. So the point of view could be from a perspective of a young person and a very important time in their life when they become an adult, or at least move from childhood into a new part of life. How is it related to the conflict? Conflict in terms of coming of age could be with parents. It could be with an outside realm. I think about all the different young adult literature out there. Coming of age is a huge theme in these things. So think about the Hunger Games. Well, here we have a character that had to grow up early in life, and then we have this even stronger development of Katniss Everdeen, where she moves from the safety or somewhat safety of her home, of her family, and then has to move into an even greater protector role in terms of having to go into these games and that kind of stuff. So you can definitely look at these themes in light of a character like Katniss Everdeen, in light of a symbol like the butterfly, or our point of view in terms of who is the story based on, and that kind of stuff. So definitely look at a theme in the light of all the other elements and techniques that are used in the work. So conflict, like I said before, is part of the author's purpose, and there can be several different types of conflict going on in the same work, or you can have one particular conflict, but there's lots of different types of conflicts. So for instance, there is the internal conflict. So that's something that happens within the main character. So a struggle that the main character has within him or herself. An external conflict could be, another character. It could be some sort of achievement that they have to go after. The external conflict would be something that is outside the main character's life and internal perspective, and it's coming at them. So it's some sort of conflict that is attacking or coming toward that character. So it could be human versus human. So that could be a conflict between a child and a parent. It could be a conflict between the good guy and the bad guy. So that's a human versus human conflict. Human versus nature. So then we have where the main character is having to battle the elements or nature or the surroundings rather than necessarily a particular person. I think of Maze Runner as an example. That's a movie that's coming out soon, but it was a book before the movie. But the main character has a huge conflict with his surroundings in that story. So we have the maze itself, and then we also just have the elements that come at the character in terms of where the character is living. I won't give too much away because I know that's a movie that a lot of people want to see. So, but definitely you have a conflict with nature, and that human versus society, that's definitely Hunger Games. If you go back to that kind of idea, but you also look at like classic things like George Orwell's 1984 is definitely human versus society. So you look at the conflict where it's located, and then human versus self. That's also that internal conflict that we talked about earlier. So, so when you're determining the conflict, you look at first, is it internal or is it external? So is the conflict, is that area of tension in the story have to do with within the character or without the character, something that the character deals with outside of him or herself. And then look at who or what is the character conflicted with. So that definitely has something to do with the author's purpose, and understanding that conflict is definitely important to being able to understand the purpose that the author has. So characterization, another element of the author's purpose, is how the author reveals the characters or people or the players of the story. So yes, we can look at these nonfiction stories, narratives, essays as one option in our paper, but you can also look at fiction elements, and you can choose for your own. I do suggest for this assignment that unless it's a book that you've already read, or if you're a fast reader, I do suggest that you do short stories or essays for this assignment, just for the sake of time. But if you wanted to do a book, you're welcome to do so. I just suggest it's one that you probably can cover within the short amount of time that we have before the paper's due. So definitely look at the syllabus, look at our course schedule, and make sure that you can line up your plan of preparing for the essay with the actual due date. So keep that in mind. So characterization is how the author reveals elements about the players in the actual work. So what are the thoughts, actions, dialogue, the thoughts of others about a particular person or idea in the story? So you can see how each of these elements, this is kind of like a Venn diagram, but how they all work together to talk about that one character or idea. So how does dialogue affect that character? How do the thoughts of others affect the character? How do the actions of the story affect that? How do the thoughts of the actual character work? So characterization is more than just giving us a rundown of a person's life as according to a story, but it's actually looking at all these different elements to create the actual person. So it also relates to themes and the author's purpose. So a character has emotional development in a story, or does the character have emotional development? Is the character dynamic? That means they change throughout the story. Or is the character static? That means they stay the same. They have the same ideas. They never change. And I'll contend that generally our main characters in a story are going to change, are going to be dynamic. Otherwise, it wouldn't be very fun to read about. But how does the character's place, how does the character fit in the setting of the work? Whether that's, where it's somewhere they grew up, or is it somewhere they feel foreign and out of place? And then personality elements. So is the person stoic? Is the person gregarious, outgoing? And how does that affect the theme or purpose that the author has? So when you're trying to put together a literary analysis, there is a process, and I think that it's important to make sure that you have a clear understanding of the work. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you've read the work. And I don't think that you should just read it once. This is why why I do suggest using short stories or essays from our textbook or outside the textbook, but short pieces of work just for the sake of time. But trying to read the work several times. And when you do that, note certain passages, take notes in terms of what is important, page numbers to pay attention to, so you can kind of get ready for the literary work. But try to read more than once. Oftentimes we read first just to get a general impression, but then as we get more of an idea of what we want to analyze and what is important in the story, going back and reading it again can help you get some more focus. Then decide upon the themes or purpose that the author has. So you're going to try to get an idea of what the purpose of the work is. And then if you're looking at you're welcome to look at two different works if you want to compare and contrast. We've already kind of worked on integrating multiple works together in an essay. So I think that that's definitely something we can talk about in the discussion board, or if you wanted to email me in terms of your ideas. But definitely look at the purpose of the work, and then just decide if there are literary elements that relate to that purpose, what elements in the story create that purpose. And then keep on collecting information until you have enough to develop a topic thoroughly. You need to have an idea. So with the analysis, you do not have to analyze every element of the story. You don't have to analyze plot, characterization, themes, historical context, all those things. You don't have to do all of it. You can choose just one to focus on. Remember, this is a shorter paper. It's under 5 pages. So yes, there is definitely some things that you need to accomplish in that, but you don't have to do all of those things. So if you wanted to just focus on setting and how a character relates to the setting, that would be a really great paper, depending on the works that you choose. Let's say you choose, something that we've read in class already, and are inspired by or interested in furthering the discussion that we had in class about that work. That would be completely acceptable. You could get ideas from the discussion board, look at what your classmates have said about it, and that can help you generate ideas for your paper. But keep in mind that you might want to zoom in and just choose 1 or 2 elements to look over. So then you need to organize your information. So for instance, if you're going to discuss how the main characters are revealed through dialogue, setting, and symbolism, so these are all literary categories, you would then group your information. So just talk about dialogue, then talk about setting, then talk about symbolism for the story or the multiple stories that you're talking about. So make sure that your information is organized and presented in a way that the reader can connect to it. So if it's all jumbled and things, then it can definitely get where it's not interesting to read. And for instance, if you're going to explore how a setting portrays that a theme of fear or a climate of fear that turns into anarchy, you could group the information under setting, fear, and anarchy. So that really would relate to something like 1984 by George Orwell, where you have how the setting, which would be, this Oceania, and the place where Winston lives, the apartment, the town, the place where he works. So these are the different settings, how that creates fear. So you look at, he's always watched by that TV thing in his room, and he's always seeing those posters of Big Brother, and how that creates that fear of, I'm always going to get caught. And then moving into the anarchy, which is when he wants to overthrow the government because he's so afraid of it. So you can actually look at that through those three elements. So describing the actual settings, and then showing how those settings create fear, and then moving into the plot sequence of the idea that he wants to overthrow the government. So you can actually create these progressions of ideas through the way that you analyze the work. So other things in organization, be sure to look at, I have some categories here that you can look at, and look at the relationships between them. So yes, organize your paper in terms of one element at a time, because that will help focus the paper. But you also want to make sure that these elements connect to one another. So what are their relationships? So if you're going to talk about a particular story, let's say you're going to write about Maya Angelou's Mrs. Flowers. So this is a short story, short autobiography of Maya Angelou, and you want to discuss characters. So your main idea is going to be the characterization of the story, but you might want to look at through different lenses. So perhaps it is point of view, because you are looking at, the story is written from the point of view of Maya Angelou about different characters in the story, and then you show how that point of view is affected by society. So Maya Angelou in this story has a particular viewpoint of what life should be like, and you're talking about different characters in terms of society. So what is Maya Angelou's place in society? What is her mother's place in society, who's also a character in the work? What about Mrs. Flowers? What is her place in the society, and how is that affected by diction? So voice and the way people speak is very important in that particular story. So how does the diction used by the different characters relate to their place in society, relate to her point of view of them? So you could definitely see how they can connect depending on the work that you choose. So this says connect the 3 works. You don't have to use 3 works. You are completely open in terms of what works you're going to choose. So sorry about that misunderstanding there. But you want to then be able to create a clear conclusion based on all those progressions of ideas. So yes, in your organization, you want to make sure that each element has its own space in your paper, and then you want to make sure that they all connect and they have relationships with one another, and then create a clear conclusion that brings everything together. So when you draft your paper, it says start with an introduction, but the paper should start with an introduction. You are always welcome to write out of order before you actually turn the paper in. But the introduction should definitely clearly state a thesis statement that lets us know what your focus is going to be. So your thesis statement should include the title of the work or works and the author's name. So that says 3 again. I apologize for that. So the work that you choose, or if you choose more than one, it should definitely state the title or titles. It should state the author or authors of the work, and it should clearly present how you are going to analyze the work. So whether that's based on theme, historical context, if it's based on literary elements, symbolism, and that kind of stuff. If you're taking on a certain point of view, maybe you're going to look at it in terms of some sort of literary approach, psychological, political, historical, and that needs to be clear in the thesis statement. So you should then also create a brief summary of the story or stories, either in your introduction, which would be fine, so giving that background information, or in separate paragraphs, and that's fine to do also. Don't spend too much time on summary, because we're going to assume that your audience has read these works. Now, of course, if you choose something that I have not read, which I will let you know, then I think the summary is going to be more important. But generally speaking, we don't want to spend too much time just summarizing the work. This is not a book report, so we don't want to just spend tons of time summarizing. We actually want to get into the heart of the analysis. So, and then in each body paragraph, take a different approach to proving your thesis statement. So this is very similar to any other type of essay writing. We want to prove what you've stated in the thesis statement. So if, for example, you can use examples from the text, you can do direct quotations, you can paraphrase the text, and then explain how those choices prove the thesis statement. So if your thesis statement, for instance, is saying that, Charles Dickens' work Hard Times covers several themes, including divorce and social class structure. So these are major themes. That's what my thesis statement is going to be. So each paragraph in the body of the essay should work to prove that this particular book has a theme of divorce. So a section is going to be talking about divorce and different areas in the book where it talks about divorce and how that relates to the work as a whole. And then it moves into social class structure. And this is how Hard Times talks about social class structure throughout the book. You might have some quotes, you might have different elements, and how do those work together? So maybe talk about it in terms of historical context. So Charles Dickens was actually, writing quite a long time ago, a couple hundred years ago, and how does that affect, how does his writing reflect the history of that time period? So you can make all those connections. So the organization should have concrete examples from the story to prove that point of view. And then create a clear conclusion that draws everything together. So remember, you're analyzing a piece of literature, work or works of your choice, and you can focus on characters, plot, historical context, and or setting of the short story or essay written by an author in our textbook. And obviously, as I have already stated, I am allowing for you to branch out. So if you have something in particular you want to talk about, definitely bring it by. We will talk about if it'll fit this assignment. So remember that your paper should be 12 point Times New Roman font in MLA format with 1-inch margins. You should save the file as a .rtf.doc or .docx and turn it into the assignment and quizzes area. I have noticed that a lot of students have been using Google Docs to turn in their paper, and although you can upload it to Blackboard, it is very hard to download it. So I'm having trouble opening those documents. Please do not turn it in as a Google Doc. I really need it to be one of these three formats. And that includes uploading it to the discussion board for analysis from your classmates. So we're having trouble accessing the documents as a Google Doc. So please turn it in as one of these types. And then, of course, turn that into the assignments and quizzes area on the week that the paper is due. You can also check out the syllabus for more details on the assignment. And, of course, our class schedule. I will be posting 2 course documents, the expanded version of what is expected for this essay very soon. And if you do have any questions, feel free to send me an email or give me a call. Otherwise, that is all I have for you. I hope that it helped you get even more perspective on literary analysis, and have a great week. All right, we will see you in the discussion board. Bye.